Hello, Lisa. How are you guys doing today? Hope all is well. Joke of the day. So, an empathetic student was walking past a protest going on in front of town hall. Her interest piqued. So, she asked one of the protesters what they were concerned about. The military industrial complex, the protester exclaimed. And it was bad enough before, but now they're recruiting babies. The student, surprised and confused, asked the protester what function the babies were going to perform in the army. The protester grimly replied, "They go straight to the infantry." Yes. All right. So, anywho, for today, we'll finish talking about the West. We haven't really spent a lot of time talking about the West, but today we'll kind of put a close on basically the Native American kind of resistance out there. Um, so last class, you kind of looked at that, you filled out that graphic organizer. Then we'll talk a little bit more kind of about that today. And yeah, and so what you'll kind of see is that once Native American resistance is gone, once Native Americans have been kind of placed on reservations, and the West then becomes opened up to further advancement, more people can go out west and kind of explore and that type of thing. So, what I have for you is basically today, some notes. I've got a little bit of a video from basically it's the end of a really bad movie called Far and Away. So I have the end of it though is shows a land rush, and so once again all these Native Americans are gone, this land is opened up for settlers, and there was huge demand for this land. It was cheap. The government wanted people to go and settle there. Um, and it was successful because by the time you get to 1890, there's no more frontier, right? The census asks people, hey, where do you live? And before there had been a frontier. So you think about the maps in the classroom, right? We have people living on the coast from California, we have people on the East Coast, and slowly people have been moving west. And those that have been moving west, right, have been settling further and further away from the coast, right? So that gap in the middle is the frontier, and it's getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And by 1890, you don't have a discernible frontier anymore. You've got pockets of people living everywhere. And that's kind of a turning point moment for the country. Um, and of course, that will segue nicely to what we'll talk about next, which is immigration. Because while this desire for more land for people to settle coincides with large groups of immigrants coming into the country, and they need a place to go. So that's kind of what we're going to be talking about today. So I hope all is well. Stay safe, stay smart, and I'll talk to you guys later. So today we'll bring our conversation on the West to a close. And unfortunately, it's not going to end well for the Native American tribes living on the plains, as you have already seen by completing that graphic organizer for last class. So as the tide is kind of turning against the Native Americans, you have two things kind of going on here. First, you have that kind of fatalism that their culture is basically being destroyed by white encroachment. But then second, you have this idea of millennialism. As you're getting further and further in the 1800s, closer to 1900, you have this sense that the world will come to an end. It happens every 100 years. You can ask your parents about living through, Y2K in the year 2000. Um, and so to combine that, you have a religious movement that kind of spreads like wildfire throughout the Great Plains. And that is something called the Ghost Dance. And the Ghost Dance is a religious movement led by a gentleman named Wavoka, who you see on your screen. And he was a Paiute Native American from Nevada. And the Ghost Dance, or the Ghost Faith, is closely resembles Christianity. It takes a lot from Christianity. And one of the weird things about this is that whites did not recognize this. So Avoca actually claimed he was Christ, or a Christ-like figure. He preaches that the end of the world is going to come, and his end of the world, basically the earth is going to be turned inside out, and that the earth will be covered in soil and dirt, and it will destroy everything on the earth's surface. Seems kind of far-fetched, but if you think about the Old Testament, the Bible, they talk about the same thing happening with water, right, and everything in the great flood and Noah and so on. So with this, once the earth is completely covered in dirt, new plants will then grow. as the new plants grow, the buffalo, the sacred animal for the Native Americans, which has been almost wiped out to extinction through hunting, will return as well. Native American ancestors will also come back to hunt those buffalo. And basically, what he is describing here is heaven, right? And so when you think about heaven, you think about your family being there. You think about the perfect place, right? And that is kind of what the Native Americans are being taught here through this. Um, they're also told um, that if they perform certain rituals, if they wear a ghost shirt, which you see on your screen here, if they perform a ritualistic dance, that they will be suspended in the air and then saved, right? They will ascend. And so when we think of heaven, if we think of heaven, we think of heaven as being up, right? And so that we will rise up and we will go to this place. Basically, what Wovoka is talking about is an afterlife. But all this is missed by a lot of different people. And so it's missed by Native Americans who take this literally. They don't see figurative. They actually think that if they wear these shirts, do these things, that they will live forever. And that these ghost shirts are then bulletproof. That if they wear these, they will actually rise up above the earth. The earth will be destroyed below them, and then they will come back down. Right? They take this literally. And so, for a group of people that have been so degraded and so beaten, this provides hope. And so now you have hope spreading all over the place through the Native American cultures, and it's not limited to one tribe, it affects several tribes. And the Army now has a problem with this, and the Army needs to kind of like basically put an end to this. And so they turn to Sitting Bull, who you should be familiar with because Sitting Bull was at the Battle of the Little Bighorn. Sitting Bull at this time is the most famous Native American living in the United States. He had fled to Canada after the Battle of the Little Bighorn, had returned back to the United States, and he actually was famous because he toured the East Coast with Wild Bill Cody, or Buffalo Bill Cody, in a traveling, basically like circus. And he was billed as the Killer of Custer. They gave him $50 a week, which was a ton of money back in the day. He also got any money that he could by selling autographs. And so he was the bad guy in the show. People would boo him, that type of thing. And his bit was that when he would ride out into the center of the ring, he would rear back on his horse, so his horse would be on his hind legs. He would fire his pistol in the air, and then as he fired his pistol in the air, the front feet of the horse, which are off the ground, would start moving back and forth, kind of like they were dancing. The kids thought this was great. That was his big show. When he is done with Buffalo Bill Cody, after touring for about a year, he returns back to a reservation. And the Army approaches him and says, hey, can you go out there and basically tell everybody that the ghost dance is a load of garbage? He believed that the ghost dance was kind of ridiculous, but he was not going to tell people that. He was not going to take away their hope, so he refused to do this. And of course, as he refused to do this, the military got upset with him. They sent Native American police on the reservation to go arrest him. He refused to be arrested. There's a shootout on his front porch, and Sitting Bull is shot and killed. And of course, in this disturbance, a crowd has gathered. So a crowd has seen Sitting Bull being shot and killed, and next to his house in the corral is his horse. And of course, as the shootout is happening, the horse rears back on his back legs, moves his front feet, and everyone in the crowd says, look, the horse is doing the ghost dance. And so now the Army has a big problem. And this happens near the Wounded Knee Reservation. And so basically what happens here is that the Native Americans rise up again. And so the Army moves into the reservation, rounds up the natives living at Wounded Knee, right? And you're familiar with this. And those Native Americans are searched. A shot rings out, and 300 members of the Sioux Nation are killed. And the Battle of Wounded Knee is significant because it is the last Native American battle. And if you look at that in 1890, and if you look at the census of 1890, there's also no longer a frontier, which means white settlement has now spread across the whole continent. And what is assisting this white settlement is that once the Native Americans are pushed off their land, it is the interest of the government to have whites settle on that land. So they passed a series of homestead acts going all the way back to the 1860s. Um, and this was very popular with people, in which you could pay a low registration fee. You just had to agree to settle on the land. You had to improve the land, make it a little bit better, build a house, put up a fence, dig a well, and then you had to live on it for 5 years before you could flip it. And this program was so successful and so many people wanted the land, they had to create something called land rushes. And the video that you have as part of your do now shows you a land rush. And then with these land rushes, people fit into two categories, Sooners or Boomers. So Sooners were people who left too soon. So if you notice in the video, there's a fire of a cannon, and at the boom of the cannon, you start your race. Those are the Boomers. People who cheated, in that video, you see some people who cheated. Those are called Sooners. So if you ever wondered why Oklahoma, they're the Oklahoma Sooners, this is why, because that video is of the Oklahoma land rush. Uh, and in the Oklahoma land rush is the last one of these rushes. And again, with that census of 1890, you now have people living everywhere. Native American culture has basically been destroyed out west. Native Americans have been removed and have been placed on reservations. Their way of life has been forever altered, all in the name of progress as whites move further west, creating more states.